judges. So sometimes when you're judging, it's really, really hard because all of the students sound amazing. So today's video is going to be about how do you distinguish between really incredible speakers, and also what kind of comments do you give in order to help them improve so that you aren't just saying great job. So when we're looking at really exceptional speakers, we sometimes will end up, usually in a round of 6 speakers, you'll end up with a top 2 or potentially a top 3 that are especially exceptional. So separating between first place and second place can be really hard. So the first tip I have is make sure that you're consistent with yourself. So every single round, the way you distinguish between first place and second place should be the same. So how do you figure that out? So the very first thing that I like to do is first think to myself, overall effectiveness. Are these students equal in terms of overall effectiveness? And that is usually in terms of, is a speech memorable or not to me? So if students are tied on overall effectiveness, meaning that they're both really memorable and amazing, I then ask myself, which topic or message is more interesting, more memorable, and more significant? And a lot of times you can ask yourself which one is more relevant today, which one is especially timely, and also which one explores the topic in a way that is unexpected or you haven't heard before. If the students are then equal on that front, on the topics, and you still can't decide, I then think to myself about the sequence of how they ordered the speech. And so if it's a speech that they didn't write themselves, a published speech, how did they construct the cutting, where the beginning really grabs your attention and the middle really develops the characters and explores the tension, and then the end really ties everything together beautifully. Or if it's original speech of theirs, which one is able to really build the argument and go into more depth and really expand the topic by the way that they sequence their points across the board. And again, if they are still equal on all of that, then I ask myself, looking at the integration of all of those things together, their delivery, their content, their sequence, their choice of topic, which performer just brings all of that together where you're not even thinking about their delivery or their hand gestures, you're just pulled into the overall performance. Because ultimately, it should captivate you. It should really capture your attention and really listen to your gut, where you are just drawn to that performance and you could really listen to it forever. That's the person that you should give first place to. So once you've decided who is first place and who is second place, you still have the added task of figuring out what are you going to tell them in their feedback. One thing you don't want to do is say good job. You can just say good job in the beginning, but you have to be able to unpack what about their performance was especially memorable. And so everything I just described are things you can put as positive feedback. The significance of the message, the sequence of the ideas, the way that they treated the topic, and how they brought everything together. And so you literally can even write ahead of time a go-to paragraph that you can then adapt and edit about the types of things you're looking for your first place competitor. And then when you see that first place competitor, compliment them on those things. Now, in terms of critique, now even our best competitors need to grow, and they really want to see some constructive feedback that they can improve on next time. So what do you even write? So we're going to watch an example today of one of the national champions of 2023, so you can't get any more exceptional than that. And they're doing an original oratory that they wrote themselves, and we're just going to watch the first minute or so. And as you watch, think to yourself, first, what is really exceptional about this speaker, and how can I be specific about that? And then we're going to talk a little bit more about the constructive feedback you can give.
The highlight of 3rd grade was being taught by the one and only Miss Frizzle from the Magic School Bus. From her bright curly orange hair to her vibrant dress matching the lesson of the day, she made learning absolutely magical. Her lessons, out of this world. Homegirl redirected an asteroid from destroying Earth. Beat that, NASA. The Frizz, as I like to call her, transformed learning from the traditional 4 walls of classrooms, allowing for real experiential learning. However, When assessed under Washington, D.C.'s school district's teacher evaluation rubric, Miss Frizzle received a mere 2.2 out of 5 and deemed minimally effective. As the Washington Post explains, under these standards, Miss Frizzle would fizzle. Likewise, with our own real Miss Frizzles, we have undervalued, underappreciated, and degraded educators. And I'm worried that if we continue to vilify educators, America will continue to lose. Magical teachers, whether it be South Dakota teachers made to compete against one another for basic school supplies, or Larry Arnn, education advisor to Tennessee Governor Bill Lee, claiming that teachers come from the dumbest parts of the dumbest colleges. Educators raise each generation of thinkers, nurturing and challenging each individual entrusted to them. But lately, they have been under attack on a scale like we've never seen, consistently humiliated. U.S. Secretary of Education Miguel Cardona says it best: we have a teacher respect issue in this country. So today, let's hop on the tragic school bus. And first, explore why we demonize teachers. Then, understand its inevitable consequences. Before finally, learning to love and acknowledge the Miss Frizzles in our own lives.
So let's go back to the positive feedback and what we're looking for from our first and second place competitors. First is the overall effectiveness. Was this memorable? And now you only saw just the beginning of her speech, which is known as the teaser. But we saw in there first a little bit of humor, a little bit of relatability, this example of Miss Frizzle that many of us remember from the Magic School Bus. And then we go into this big shift in tone about why and how we demonize teachers. And that's something we can all really relate to. And so when we think about the overall effectiveness, it was so creative how she started off that introduction with something relatable, a really specific example, and then she brought that into the relevance of how we treat teachers and how that's a problem in our society. So in overall effectiveness, I would just say that. I would talk about how she really brought forward the relevance, and she did this through these ways. Now, when I think about how she sequenced it, it was also interesting because she didn't just mention the example of Mrs. Frizzle. She actually spent a good minute or so on Mrs. Frizzle and talking about it and really bringing it to life. So I just love that detail that she brings to the table. And then that big shift in tone, she was able to take a moment and help us actually move into the significance of her topic. So the sequencing and how she managed her time in that introduction is something I would mention. And then finally, how she brought her delivery together with the message. She wasn't just pausing. She wasn't just using hand gestures or eye contact. She used those things in connection to the emotion around the topic. And that's something that really differentiates first and second place competitors, is that they really feel the piece. No matter what they're doing, whether it's a published speech or something they wrote themselves, they feel the emotion. And so that's when it's not just a collection of delivery techniques, it's all integrated. The topic, the emotion, the delivery, it's all coming together so you can just sit back and listen to this really incredible speech. So those are the types of things I would mention. I wouldn't say it in quite as much time and detail. I might do 3 different bullets related to overall effectiveness, content and sequencing, and the integration of delivery and emotion. And then when I think about, okay, how can I even begin to think about how she would improve the speech? For me, I always ask myself, what would be able to help the audience really take home her message as quickly and as impactfully as possible? And so I might actually, 3 minutes and 23 seconds is a little long for a teaser because I really want to get into the meat of the evidence of the speech and really learn more about the depth of the argument. And it's a 10-minute speech. And so 3.5 minutes in, She only has less than 7 minutes to cover all the rest of her content. So I might make a comment about being able to help her do the same thing she's doing, but maybe condense it a little bit more so she can get to the meat of her argument. I also think in terms of delivery that I really loved her tone shift from the liveliness and the excitement and energy, and then all of a sudden to the importance of the advocacy she's bringing up. But I almost wanted more of the energy in the very beginning, a little bit more of the humor, because Mrs. Frizzle's kind of wacky and she does a nice job describing it, but I almost wanted her to lean into more of that energy. So again, with constructive feedback, I'm really nitpicking because I love this speech and she obviously did really well. But I always think, what is she going for? She's trying to communicate this contrast in emotion so that she can bring forward the message of the topic. And how can she do that even more effectively in terms of how she spends her time in the speech, or how she adjusts her tone, or maybe where she pauses, or you can even get really nitpicky and talk about some of the language that she uses. But I walked away really understanding what her topic was about. And that's why she would probably get a first place in my round, is because she's able to really get that message through. And the rest is just little improvements that she can do, because just because she's exceptional now doesn't mean that she can't continue to grow. So for you as a judge, do your best. It's really amazing to listen to first place and second place competitors, because they just really open your eyes to how incredible youth voice can be. And you want to be able to help them grow, and telling them specifically what they did really well is important, like we discussed today, but also helping them do that same speech even more effectively by telling them what your experience was. And so you are the expert in your own experience. And so you being able to describe what would make it more effective for you is really important for the student to hear. So happy judging and good luck.